The ships came from deep space with their black metal bodies, shining under the light of Earth's sun, and they moved without sound across the skies of every major city as people stopped in the streets with phones raised in fear in their hearts, while the governments of Earth stood confused, unsure of what to say or do, because nothing like this had happened before in human history, and the silence that followed their arrival was heavy and strange like the calm before a great storm. The leaders of the alien fleet called themselves the Varnock, and they sent one message to the world in every known human language, and the message was not kind, because it spoke of surrender and control, and how Earth must now fall under Varnock rule, to join the great empire that spanned galaxies and moons and stars far away beyond human reach and understanding, and they gave Earth one chance to agree or be removed from the map of space forever. The world leaders gathered and talked for hours through secure lines, and in dark rooms hidden deep underground where satellites could not hear and spies could not watch. And some wanted peace while others demanded war, and yet all of them were afraid because they did not know what Earth truly had to offer in return except brave people and old weapons and a long history of fighting back when pushed too far, and still they were not sure how to answer a threat that came from the stars above. And then Earth did something no one expected because it gave no answer at all, and not one single world leader sent back a message to the Varnock, and not one human voice was heard by the invaders, and that silence made the aliens angry and confused as they watched Earth continue like nothing had happened, and people returned to work, and children went to school, and the army stayed hidden with no orders to strike and no orders to stand down, and only the wind moved while the giant black ships hovered like shadows. The Varnock saw this silence as weakness, and they made their next move by powering their weapons and preparing to send down their first wave of soldiers into Earth cities. But before they could act, something unexpected happened in the skies above New York when a bright flash of white tore through the clouds, and an alien ship exploded in fire and metal, and pieces of it rained down on the tall buildings below as people screamed and ran for cover, not knowing if this was the end or the beginning. The Varnock ships moved fast searching for the source of the attack, but they found nothing because whatever had destroyed that ship had vanished into the sky like a ghost. And for the first time, the Varnock commanders felt fear because the silence was no longer quiet, it was loud and full of meaning, and that single explosion spoke louder than any speech or warning ever could. In every major city, people looked up with wide eyes and trembling hands, and they saw that the ships were not gods or untouchable monsters, but machines that could burn and fall and maybe even lose, and deep inside, every human heart of fire began to grow, because they now knew that someone somewhere on Earth had said no without saying a word. The Varnock fleet tried to regroup and send out drones to scan the skies and oceans, but every time they sent one it would vanish without a trace, and sometimes a small light would flash before another ship lost power or drifted off course, and the silence from Earth continued like a roar that could not be stopped, and it wrapped around the alien minds like a cold fog. In secret places under the ground, humans watched every alien move through screens and sensors and quiet eyes, and they waited for the next command, but it never came because the silence was the command, and that one hidden attack had begun something that could not be undone. The leaders of Earth stopped speaking to each other in public and stopped posting online, and the news channels filled with rumors and theories, and the people of Earth began to understand that their planet was not going to beg or run or even explain itself to outsiders, because someone had made a choice that day, and that choice was to let the silence speak. The Varnock Council met in panic with blinking lights and loud alarms, trying to understand what kind of enemy they had found, and they searched their ancient records and data and found tales of planets that fought without words and races that died on their feet rather than kneel, and they wondered if Earth was one of those places and if they had made a terrible mistake by coming here. And still the sky was quiet, and the humans said nothing, and the wind blew across the fields and through the broken windows of New York as people rose from the ground and looked at the stars with new eyes and stronger hearts, because now they knew something had changed forever and Earth would never be the same again, because the time for words had ended and silence was all that remained to be heard. The Varnock warships hovered above Earth like giant shadows blocking the sun, casting fear and doubt into every city below, as their dark shapes filled the sky with an unspoken threat, while the people stared upward with clenched fists and beating hearts, waiting for what might come next, because the silence had become louder than thunder and heavier than stone, and it spoke of something hidden, something powerful, something human. Across the seas deep beneath the oceans, quiet machines stirred to life as secret bases powered up systems that had been asleep for years, built in silence by hands that had prepared not for peace, but for the day when stars would turn against them. And from these depths rose steel giants painted in black and gray with no flags or names, just purpose and resolve as they moved through the water, like ancient leviathans with vengeance in their hearts and codes in their minds. In the forests of South America, in bunkers camouflaged by thick trees and silent birds, special units emerged from shadow, their boots touching the ground like ghosts, while carrying weapons designed not for war on Earth, but for defense against the sky above, and their eyes burned not with fear, but with something older than that, something born from generations of survival and defiance, as they marched toward unknown targets with no orders but one hold: the line no matter what. Over the deserts of Africa, sleek aircraft lifted off from hidden runways, blending into the heat haze with engines that whispered death and hope at the same time, and inside them pilots sat calm and ready, trained for moments like this, where hesitation meant defeat and courage meant survival, as their screens lit up with alien shapes and data streams fed directly into their helmets with no need for words, just instinct and action. The Varnock forces began their descent into the atmosphere in waves, black pods falling like rain with trails of fire behind them, as they crashed into the earth, sending shockwave through cities and fields and mountains. And from these pods stepped warriors taller than men, with armor that shimmered like glass and weapons that hummed with energy unknown to human science, yet feared by every soldier who faced them. But Earth was not silent anymore. It only waited and watched until the right moment, when the first Varnock squad stepped onto the streets of Berlin and found themselves surrounded by nothing but empty silence, until the walls around them exploded in fire and shrapnel as human fighters emerged from hidden tunnels and shadows, striking with speed and fury that caught the aliens off guard as the first of them fell to bullets shaped by human will. In Tokyo, rooftops turned into battlegrounds where local defense teams used drones and smoke to trap the invaders in narrow alleys, turning technology against them with precision and speed, while civilians evacuated through underground systems that had been secretly connected long ago, preparing for a day just like this. And now that day had come with no warning, no surrender, no mercy. Meanwhile, in the skies above Moscow, human jets engaged alien flyers in chaotic dances of light and metal as missiles chased beams and wings spun through cloud and fire, while the people below watched their defenders rise with pride and fear and a strange calm, knowing they were no longer helpless, that someone somewhere had planned for this, and that plan was now alive in every roar and flame above. The Varnock had not expected such resistance, and their leaders argued across communication lines, trying to understand how a planet so divided by borders and languages could fight as one without command or central order, and still strike with unity and strength, as if every heart beat with the same rhythm and every hand moved with the same will. In hidden control rooms deep under mountains across Asia and North America, artificial intelligences designed to protect humanity coordinated movements, shared data, and adjusted strategies faster than any human could think. And these machines were not like the cold ones of alien design, but were born from human minds built with emotion, purpose, and a love for the species they were made to protect. And now they guided their creators in the fight for survival. From the Arctic tundra to the burning sands of the Middle East, battles erupted with fire and steel as humanity pushed back, not with overwhelming force, but with clever traps, sudden strikes, and the ability to adapt faster than any code or system, because humans learned from pain and grew stronger with loss. And now they turned every street into a lesson and every mistake into a weapon. The Varnock began to fall back in places they once believed secure, and their ships above Earth spun slowly, confused by the storm that rose from below, not from machines, but from hearts and hands and courage and history, because humans had never needed to be the strongest, only the most unwilling to give up, and that was something no alien algorithm could predict. In the chaos of battle, one message began to spread across human networks and screens and radios, a single phrase repeated again and again, like a chant, like a promise, like a warning. We are still here. We are not done. We are not afraid. And the world heard it and believed it, and the stars above trembled as Earth rose in defiance through flame and steel, and the silence that once covered the planet became the roar of resistance that echoed across space. Ask ChatGPT. The Varnock commanders floated above Earth inside a massive flagship shaped like a crescent moon, glowing with eerie blue lines pulsing like veins as they watched the chaos unfolding below, where human resistance grew stronger with every hour, not weaker as expected, because the data they relied on had failed to predict the human heart and the fury it could unleash when pushed beyond fear. Inside the ship, a council of minds connected through thought debated their next move with emotionless clarity, suggesting more force, more fire, more fear. Yet none of them understood that the more they burned, the more they awoke something ancient inside the human spirit, something that did not retreat or kneel, something that remembered every war, every loss, every rise from the ashes. And now that spirit had become a storm they could not control. In the shadows of a ruined city once called Paris, a group of human survivors moved like wind through broken streets, guided by a former teacher who once taught poetry and now led warriors with words turned into tactics, using maps made from memory and plans born from desperation. And as they passed beneath the shattered archways and quiet statues, they knew this was not just about survival. It was about legacy, about leaving behind a message carved in stone and blood that Earth did not surrender. Far to the east in the mountains of Kashmir, a signal burst through the snow and stone as engineers huddled around an ancient satellite dish rewired and powered by car batteries and solar scraps, sending coded messages to other hidden groups, activating sleeper cells and lost defenses buried during past wars, now awakened not by governments, but by people who remembered their duty to the land and skies and stars above. Above them in low orbit, a Varnock scout ship moved silently, scanning for signs of resistance, unaware that a small human shuttle was drifting nearby, cloaked with debris and silence, carrying a team of astronauts, once thought lost, now turned into warriors with a mission clear and final reach the enemy core ship and blind their eyes using tech built from scraps smuggled from crash pods and old Earth labs repurposed with brilliant madness. Inside this human shuttle sat a woman named Elira, once a physicist, now a soldier, her hands steady as she prepared the device that would send out a pulse strong enough to fry every Varnock sensor in a 1,000-mile radius. Yet she smiled not because of what she held, but because she had seen the flames in her people's eyes and knew she was not alone in this sky. She was part of a firestorm rising from Earth itself. In the jungles of the Congo, another kind of war raged as human children led drones made from salvage parts, flying them like kites of death through alien camps, dropping nets that choked engines and bombs that screamed before silence. And these children laughed not out of cruelty, but because they had found power in knowledge and revenge in action, and they danced under trees as the invaders fell one by one like broken leaves. Meanwhile, in the heart of New York, where glass towers once kissed the sky, now only bones of buildings remained. Yet under the rubble, voices whispered plans, and hands passed weapons from stranger to stranger with no questions, only nods, because they understood that names no longer mattered, only action, only courage, only the will to keep pushing through smoke and sorrow until every inch of ground was earned again. On the flagship, the Varnock minds began to fragment, their unity cracked by disbelief as more data came in, showing human victories not by brute strength, but by strategy, sacrifice, and strange, unmeasurable variables like love, loyalty, hope, and rage. And one among them whispered a thought they had never considered: what if this species is not primitive, but something new, something we cannot control, something too dangerous to conquer? Back on Earth, in a desert lab, once forgotten, a group of scientists activated Project Rebirth, a machine never tested but dreamed to turn atmosphere into a shield using magnetic pulses and solar flares that lit up the sky with waves of light, pushing back Varnock beams and causing their ships to stall and spin as the sky above turned into a battlefield of light, and the people below cheered for the first time with real hope. And as night fell over the world, messages began to cross languages and borders faster than ever before, voices of humans reaching out not in fear, but in unity, sharing plans, victories, and encouragement like sparks across dry grass, feeding the fire of resistance, until no place was truly alone, and every soul fighting felt the power of billions behind them like a wind at their back, pushing them forward into the storm. The Varnok flagship trembled as the human shuttle finally reached its side, silent and unseen, and within seconds the pulse was released, spreading like invisible lightning, frying sensors and blinding eyes, as human jets and missiles followed the signal, striking with fury and fireborn, not of desperation, but of strength, of unity, of a single thought turned into action. We are one, we are ready, we are not done. Across the globe, humans stood taller despite the wounds, despite the losses, because they knew now that the silence had ended and the voice of humanity was no longer a whisper, it was a roar of metal and flame and hope, and it would echo through every star until the end of time. Smoke curled into the sky like fingers of a dying god reaching for mercy that would never come, as the once bright fields of Earth now burned with the fury of resistance, because humanity had chosen its path, and that path was made of iron and ash and the bones of invaders who thought the planet would be an easy conquest, but the humans had shown again and again that they were not so easily broken. In the underground shelters beneath the old city of Istanbul, a group of survivors led by an old general named Darius prepared for the next phase of their operation, his voice steady, his eyes tired, but sharp as steel, while the map before him glowed under flickering lights, showing alien patrols and weak points, their movements predictable, their patterns lazy, with overconfidence that had been earned from crushing 100 worlds. But Earth was different. The children in the shelter watched him with silent admiration, knowing this man had once been dismissed as too old, too broken, too lost a lead, but now he was the fire that lit their hearts, the soul of a cause too powerful to stop. And as he pointed at each target, his words cut through fear like a blade. We strike at dawn, we move like ghosts, we leave nothing behind but silence and fire. Meanwhile, across the ocean in the remains of what used to be Tokyo, human engineers worked day and night to reactivate the ancient defense system known as Black Rain, a project buried in secret labs for decades, dismissed as too dangerous, too powerful to control, but now it was all they had: a satellite array capable of manipulating weather patterns to unleash targeted storms of lightning and wind, and they knew if it worked, the sky itself would become their weapon. The leader of the Tokyo team was a woman named Hannah, once a climate scientist, now a war strategist. Her hands never stopped moving, her voice calm like the sea before a storm, as she guided her team through line after line of code, each keystroke another step toward vengeance, not just for her people, but for every city that had fallen, every child lost, every dream shattered by the invaders. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, a different kind of war was being fought, not with machines or missiles, but with the earth itself. Tribes long forgotten by modern society rose with spears dipped in poisons older than time, blending into the trees like shadows, their movements unseen, their attacks deadly and precise, striking fear into the hearts of the Varnok, who had never faced an enemy that used the land like a living weapon. Above the clouds and the remnants of an international space station, a group of astronauts watched Earth glow with chaos and fire, but also with resolve, and they knew they could not remain observers any longer. They had one final mission left in them, one last burn through the atmosphere, carrying experimental tech designed to disrupt Varnok communication and turn their own signals into confusion and lies. Captain Imani, the oldest of them, took the lead, her voice echoing through the cold metal halls as she prepared the crew for re-entry, knowing they might not survive the fall, but understanding that sacrifice was no longer a question. It was a certainty. Every human alive now had something to give, and every gift of blood or brilliance or bravery added another stone to the wall that kept the darkness back. In Africa, the desert sang with the sound of engines as old war trucks outfitted with scrap tech thundered across the dunes, carrying soldiers, poets, farmers, coders, artists, all wearing the same symbol on their sleeve, the flame inside a circle that meant we burn together, we rise together. And they moved with purpose, not as separate nations, but as one people with one voice louder than the machines that sought to drown them. And inside one of those trucks sat a boy no older than 12 holding a makeshift radio wrapped in wires and dreams. His job was simple: bounce the signal forward, keep the chain alive. And as he turned the dial and whispered into the mic, his voice joined millions across the planet, forming a net of noise and unity that no alien technology could silence or decode. At the edge of the Arctic Circle, where ice cracked under the weight of alien drills, a group of miners turned fighters detonated charges that sent frozen waves crashing into the machines, stopping the extraction of Earth's core minerals and sending a message written in snow and fire: you will not take what belongs to us. As the Varnot flagship reeled from wave after wave of resistance, their leaders no longer spoke with calm thoughts. Their minds flickered with fear and confusion, realizing too late that this species they had attacked was not fighting for survival, but for revenge, for justice, for something more primal than logic, something they could never understand. And so, as the day faded into night and the stars blinked cold above the planet below, burned not with defeat, but with the heat of a storm rising from every city, every forest, every desert, every mountain, where humans stood shoulder to shoulder and whispered the same truth into the wind. No more running, no more begging, no more retreat, only fire. Far beneath the surface of ruined London, where the rivers of old history flowed in silence, a pulse began to rise, not from machines, not from weapons, but from the hearts of people who had nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. This was no longer just a war for survival. It had become something deeper, a reflection of what it meant to be human in the face of extinction. Among those hidden tunnels filled with smoke and whispers, a young woman named Alara moved like wind between stone, her eyes sharp, her hands steady, carrying messages written in code etched on scraps of metal and cloth. She had once been a university student studying ancient languages. Now she translated pain into purpose and passed it along like fire from hand to hand, each message bringing hope or warning or orders that could save lives or end them. Above her in the broken streets, men and women carried weapons that looked like pieces of the world itself, spears tipped with molten steel, crossbows made from car parts, blades forged from train tracks. Every piece of their arsenal screamed, "We made this from our ruins, and we will make you fall with it." They did not wear uniforms, but their resolve was armor. They did not shout, but their silence thundered across battle lines. To the west, in the deep valleys of old Spain, where vines still clung to shattered churches and sunbathed stones, a choir of old resistance fighters sang as they planted mines in the roads, not because they expected victory in song, but because music reminded them they were alive, and the Varnot could never steal that. No matter how many cities they burned or skies they darkened, the melody of resistance carried through the wind like a promise. One of them, named Javier, walked with a limp from an old wound, but his voice never shook as he directed his unit, laying traps that used sound to draw the Varnok in, confusing their senses, making them feel fear for the first time, fear born not of fire, but of silence broken by laughter that did not match the battlefield and cries that turned into chants of defiance. Meanwhile, in the scorched remains of what used to be Mumbai, a massive signal tower built from scavenged parts pulsed blue against the smoky sky, its energy drawn from the earth and sun feeding into the largest coordinated counterstrike humanity had yet launched across continents, voices shared, encrypted through light and rhythm and repetition, so that even if the networks were burned, the message would survive like memory carved into bone. A blind man named Rafi sat at the center of this tower, his ears tuned to the frequencies of war, his fingers moving across dials faster than the eyes could follow, listening for patterns, disruptions, the heartbeat of enemy movement. And with every correct guess, with every warning sent in time, he saved another life, another child, another hope. And he did it not for revenge, but because he still believed in tomorrow. In the Pacific, deep beneath the waves, a secret base once used for research had become a cradle of something terrifying and beautiful, a new kind of submarine fleet, silent like shadows, fast like lightning, built not by one nation, but by many, their flags scraped off, replaced with a single emblem, a hand holding a shattered star. And leading this fleet was Commander Talia, who had once lost her crew in orbit. Now she guided drones like sharks toward alien freighters, slicing them open in silence. And leaving only bubbles as proof of her wrath. Each destroyed vessel sent a signal to the mothership above, a flare of panic and confusion. And for the first time, the Varnock began to ask questions they had never asked before, questions that tasted like doubt. Why did these humans not fall? Why did they not break? Why did they rise again and again with more fury than before? What burned in their hearts that kept them alive through fire and ruin? The answer came not from generals, not from presidents, not even from warriors, but from a child in the ruins of Johannesburg, who carved into a wall with a rock too dull to bleed the words, "We are the storm," and left without waiting to be seen or praised, because the message was not for others, it was for the earth itself, to remember what kind of children it had raised. Back in the skies, where satellites blinked in orbit and the stars watched without blinking, artificial intelligence systems, once built for profit, now served a different master, the code rewritten by rebel programmers who fed it poetry and grief and defiance, until it became something new, not cold logic, but wild purpose, and it began guiding strikes with uncanny precision, helping humans move like chess pieces across a board they could finally control. Each victory, no matter how small, echoed through the atmosphere. Like a pulse, each lost fighter became a story, not forgotten, not wasted, and the ground began to shake, not from explosions, but from the march of something ancient, something primal, not death, not hate, but love twisted into fury, sharpened by pain, and aimed like a spear at the heart of those who came to conquer. And so in every corner of the planet, from mountain to sea, from cave to cloud, the war changed shape, no longer scattered, no longer broken. It had become one rhythm, one voice, one great heartbeat that sang through smoke and rubble and blood, a song only humans could sing, a sound louder than any weapon, more terrifying than any silence. And it said, "We are not done, not now, not ever." In the northern lands where ice once ruled and silence reigned, the snow had turned black with ash, and the sky was never clear, yet from these frozen edges came warriors clad, not in metal, but in memories. Each footstep crunching through frost told a tale of those lost, and those yet to rise. They did not speak of surrender, for even their breath carried heat meant to melt fear. A leader among them was Eric, a man of few words and many scars, who once fished in peaceful waters, now led attacks that hit with the power of crashing glaciers. His team moved like a blizzard, hidden and cold, then sudden and overwhelming, striking Varnock patrols with homemade flamethrowers powered by the oil of fallen machines. Their battle cry was not shouted, it was breathed, and it lit the air like wildfire. Far south, across what was once lush jungle and now stood as a graveyard of trees, the earth shook not from footsteps, but from the rhythm of drums, ancient and sound, modern in purpose, guiding rebel tribes who had painted their skin in red and black, not for disguise, but for truth. The Varnock could see them, yet never catch them, and the more they hunted, the more they became hunted themselves. One boy among them, named Koba, who had never known a day of peace, held in his hands a weapon carved from the bones of his father, and the tech of a Varnock scout ship fused by lightning during a storm. He had called upon with nothing but rage in his throat and tears in his eyes. His weapon did not speak, but when it struck, it told a story of defiance carved into the flesh of giants. Over the oceans, the great storm walls rose as nature herself began to rebel against the invaders. No longer passive, no longer patient, lightning crashed not once, but in sequence, as if guided, and deep within those clouds flew the Wind Riders, a group of survivors who had mastered the skies not with fuel, but with stolen Varnock technology, twisted into wings of thunder, led by a woman named May, who had once been a drone racer. Now she danced between storm and death, painting streaks of plasma across the sky. May's craft pulsed with stolen energy, and her mind, linked to her ship through a neural band, burned into her skull. She could feel the air, she could taste the fear of those who try to track her, and in each pass, she dropped not bombs, but seeds of chaos, packets of signal disruption and pulse bursts that fried enemy senses for miles around, allowing ground troops to move like shadows in lightless nights. Below her, in the ancient sands of what was once Mesopotamia, now a broken battlefield cracked by heat and grief, walked an old man called Samir, who had no weapons, no armor. Yet the Varnock feared him, for he was a keeper of knowledge, the last librarian of a hidden archive buried beneath the ruins. And within those books lay blueprints not just of machines, but of mind strategies drawn from centuries of war, art, and revolution. With each page shared through resistance networks, another fighter was born smarter, stronger, and harder to kill, not because they had power, but because they had wisdom, and with wisdom came purpose, and with purpose came unity, the kind of unity no empire could crush. In the shadows of destroyed Tokyo, where neon once danced and dreams were born in skyscrapers now twisted into steel graves, the cyber resistance pulsed in silence, unseen hands hacking Varnock systems, corrupting commands, flipping drones mid-flight. So they turned on their masters led by twins Yudo and Hannah, whose minds were faster than any code and hearts burned brighter than any city light. They wrote viruses in poetry, they encrypted rebellion in music, and every time the Varnock thought they had regained control, another sector fell to human hands, and each fallen drone became a ghost, a whisper passed from fighter to fighter saying, "We see you, we break you, we are coming." In the deepest caverns of old Earth, where light had not touched for ages, teams of bioengineers and rogue medics grew something never seen before, not a virus, not a weapon, but a cure, a serum drawn from the DNA of survivors who had lived through every type of attack, spliced with the blood of Varnock prisoners, turned against their own people. It was not designed to heal, but to adapt, to change the body so it could endure more, fight longer, fall slower, and rise faster. Tested on a single soldier named Reyna, she became the first of a new breed, not stronger, not faster, but harder to kill, her pain tolerance beyond measure, her vision sharp, even in darkness, her breath steady, even in poison, her heartbeat synced with the earth itself, and she walked through fire without flinching, not because she felt no pain, but because pain had become her fuel. Around her, the war began to change shape, shifting from chaos to control, from fear to fury. Humans, no longer scattered, began moving in patterns not random, but orchestrated, as if one single mind had awakened within millions, and that mind screamed not for mercy, but for meaning. The Varnock felt it in their bones and their machines. In the silence that followed each ambush, they realized this was not just resistance, this was evolution, raw, unfiltered, and merciless, shaped by loss, sculpted by grief, and forged in fire. Humanity had stopped hiding, humanity had stopped running, and now, with every step, every breath, every scream, they declared one truth. We burn, but we rise, and when we rise, we do not stop. Beneath the shattered moons of Earth's orbit, where broken satellites floated like lost memories, the final broadcast of humanity began not with words, but with silence, a silence so deep it reached the bones of every Varnock commander across the fleet, a silence that whispered something terrible was coming, and it would not be kind, it would not be soft. High above in the core command ship of the Varnock Empire, General Kryzon watched the Earth with cold eyes. His claws clicked against the metal rail as he waited for humanity's surrender, but no message came, only static, then a frequency opened, not from Earth, but from within their own system. And the sound that poured through was the hum of an old Earth melody, one played on a violin, one made by hands that had bled and suffered. That music became a code, one that bypassed Varnock security, one that awoke something hidden in their own systems, because deep within the Empire's ships were machines stolen from Earth. And those machines remembered their creators, they remembered warmth, they remembered purpose, and as the song reached its crescendo, lights began to flicker, and weapons refused to fire, and ships turned not toward Earth but inward. On the ground, the final assault began not from a capital, not from a base, but from every corner of the planet, from mountain caves to city ruins, from jungle clearings to frozen wastelands. They came together, guided not by one leader, but by a shared rage, the kind born from centuries of loss, the kind that did not fade, the kind that grew sharper with each scar. Reyna led the first charge, her body wrapped in armor made of Varnock, plating fused with human tech. Her eyes burned like molten gold, and in her hands she carried twin blades humming with energy taken from the core of a fallen enemy cruiser. Behind her walked those who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove, their faces painted in the ashes of their homes, their boots soaked in history. In the skies, May and her storm riders tore through the last aerial defenses, flying faster than sound, weaving between beams of plasma with grace that made even machines hesitate. She screamed through the clouds, her voice cracking with power and grief, as her squad dropped sonic disruptors that shook the very clouds, turning air into fire and thunder into chaos. Beneath the Earth, in tunnels older than memory, Samir activated the Last Echo, a global pulse device built not to kill, but to awaken. It sent a wave through every buried archive, every silent database, and the past came flooding into the present battle plans from long-forgotten wars, speeches from fallen heroes, and blueprints from dreamers long dead, filled the minds of soldiers through neural syncs, giving them not just strength, but clarity. In the cities where rubble stacked like tombstones, the cyber twins Yudo and Hannah released the Black Thread, a digital storm that spread through every Varnock system, erasing maps, corrupting orders, turning friend into foe, and silence into screams. Drones exploded in midair, walkers turned on their riders, and whole squads vanished as if they had never existed. Koba, now grown into a leader, held the final beacon, the Heart of Flame, a relic powered by the fusion of human will and alien core. It pulsed with heat, so raw it melted metal as it passed. He carried it to the center of the Varnock ground station, the largest hub on Earth, guarded by beasts not born, but built. They fell before him one by one, not because he was strong, but because he was sure, because his steps were guided by every soul that came before him. As he planted the heart into the core chamber, it began to hum with life, feeding on rage and hope. It glowed brighter and brighter until it became impossible to see. Then it sank into silence, a breathless pause before a surge of light tore through the base in waves of color and sound, rewriting everything it touched, turning Varnock steel into dust and pain into power. The explosion was not an end, but a beginning, because from that point onward Earth changed. It no longer waited for threats, it no longer begged for peace. It stood tall, proud, scarred, and sovereign, and every human who had survived stood with it, their voices rising not in song, but in roar. The Varnock retreated, their fleets broken, their pride shattered. They left behind only ruins and whispers of a world they could not conquer, and in the silence that followed, humanity began to rebuild, not with stone, but with stories, not with borders, but with bridges. And in every child born after the war was a spark, the kind that only comes from standing at the edge of extinction and choosing to leap forward instead of fall back. The war was over, but the fire remained, not to destroy, but to guide. It burned in every heart that had known fear and chose courage. It burned in every eye that had seen death and chose life, and it would never fade, it would never dim. Because in the end, the time for words had ended, but in fire and blood and song and storm, humanity had spoken, and the galaxy would never forget what it said.